This is a message to all of us about our children, the children of this generation. We stood silent while 60 million children lost their lives because it was inconvenient for us to say anything. We cannot make the mistake on this topic. The parents' authority over their children cannot be co-opted, cannot be given away to the government. I refuse to relinquish that to an elected official.
Bills introduced in the House and the Senate that would guarantee certain rights to parents over their own children, rights on books, on sex, on secrets, and what the children are being taught. I was under the impression that we had those rights, not from lawmakers, but simply from being mothers and fathers of our kids. Well, the author of Big Trouble Ahead, A Real Plan for Flourishing in a Time of Fear and Deception, Pastor Alan Jackson, joins us now. Pastor, good to see you.
Good to see you, Doug.
You know, I was just reading up on a story here about one of the manifestations of these issues that we're talking about, a very specific manifestation of it. It has to do with gender affirming in the schools. Let me read this headline from Blaze Media, September 30th. House Democrats on Thursday unanimously voted to block legislation that would have required informed parental consent before a school provides mental health services related to sexual orientation or gender identity to students. Every single Democrat in the House voted against that. They don't want to give any parental rights to parents.
It's almost beyond belief. It is absolutely beyond the pale that the government would imagine that they have authority over our children. This is, if there was ever a time we have to find our voice, this is not a political issue. This is an issue about what our lives will look like and what our children and grandchildren will become. We're not just standing up for our children and for everybody listening. This isn't just about your children if you have small children in the house. This is a message to all of us about our children, the children of this generation. We stood silent while 60 million children lost their lives because it was inconvenient for us to say anything. We cannot make the mistake on this topic. The parents' authority over their children cannot be co-opted, cannot be given away to the government. I refuse to relinquish that to an elected official who's going to take a poll before they decide what they believe about the children in our homes. That's simply unacceptable, and we have to find our voice.
You know, there's to delve a little bit further into this whole gender dysphoria issue, which is becoming such a hot topic right now. I was just perusing the web before my interview with you, and I came upon one medical outfit. It's a nationwide organization called Charlie Health, which helps teens apparently suffering from gender dysphoria. And it has on its website, you know, under the topic of what we do, it says we provide gender-affirming care. That refers to a variety of social, behavioral, and medical interventions that are designed to support the process of transitioning genders. Some examples of gender-affirming care include social affirmations, puberty blockers, surgical interventions, hormone therapy, and gender-affirming psychotherapy. We're going out into uncharted territory here with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is not science. You know, dysphoria is a fancy word for confusion. And I have compassion on anybody who is confused. You know, my Bible says God's not the author of confusion, so I don't believe God creates us in a confused state. I believe other factors contribute to that kind of confusion, whether we're children or adults. But affirming confusion is affirming destruction, and we cannot be a part of that. It's reprehensible what is happening. And the silence that's coming from people, this is not about science. Even the clinics that are involved participating in these gender transformative procedures, whether they're chemical or physical, they are abusing our children, and sometimes they're doing it with parental consent. Minors being subjected to life-altering procedures. It's unthinkable. This is Mengele-like. We hear these stories from other generations and things that are too abhorrent to be remembered, and yet now they're happening on our watch. And to say that the parents consented to it does not make it all right. If the parents consent to giving their children alcohol and they send them to school in an altered state, we call that bad parenting. You see, we have lost our balance. Good and evil exist. There is right and there is wrong. And in our desire to throw off restraint, into lawlessness, We have even now refused to acknowledge that there's good and evil in our home. My father's a veterinarian. I grew up in a barn. And I assure you, in the barnyard, there's no gender dysphoria. The bulls know where they belong, and the cows know where they belong. And if you're confused about that, you're not going to flourish very long in the farmyard.
Yet the people who favor this kind of thing will come up with any rationalization for it. Jordan Peterson, this psychology professor who I'm a huge admirer of, makes this argument against their argument. He says, if you insist that gender identity is a social construct, that's behind this whole stuff, then what are the hormones for? He makes a great point about that.
Well, they've spent the last 30 months hammering on us to follow the science until it's inconvenient. Right. And then don't talk to me about the science. We're going to talk about thought leaders and social constructions. Well, this is not about a social construction. This is about being born male or female. And someone's going to have the courage to stand in the midst of this. My friends in the medical community, let's tell the truth about this. This is bad science. And we can't allow the children to be subjected to this kind of mistreatment and abuse so that we avoid being labeled something. We've got to come back and say the children of this generation matter enough to us that we will not capitulate to this bullying that's coming to us from social media and political institutions and whomever else is clamoring for this nonsense.
What do you think the point is behind this, though? Who's driving it? Where is it coming from? Is it simply a case of true evil, as you suggest?
Well, I'm a pastor. I'll tell you where I think it comes from the pit of hell. I think it's a spiritual conflict we're watching. This isn't something that's dreamt up by politicians. Politicians want power. Mm-hmm. My dear friend Charlie Daniels wrote a song, and he said, a politician wants another vote. He said some things about preachers in that same song, so I'm not throwing stones. But we shouldn't be confused. This is about consolidating power on a political level. But on the family level, this is about freedom and liberty and the dreams and aspirations we have for our children. And we can't bow to the social pressures or the labels that our antagonist would want to affix to us. We have to stand for what's right and what's wrong. There is good and there is evil. And we have to have the courage to say that to this generation. Mm-hmm.
That's such a great point. You know, to take it to just a less spiritual level and just look at it in its most simple terms. You remember a time when some little girls tended to be tomboys. And I guarantee that 99% of them grew out of it and enjoyed, playing rough and tumble sports with the boys out there. There were little boys who liked to play with dolls on occasion, or little girls who liked to play with toy trucks or army soldiers, things of that sort. But the vast majority of them grow out of it,
Well, there's a difference in being a tomboy or being athletic or being a guy and being creative. When I was 15, if you'd told me I'd have been admitted to the girls' locker room if I said I was confused about my gender, I'd have probably gotten confused for the afternoon. But those are different objectives. What we're visiting upon the children is something entirely different now. They are altering their physical bodies to satisfy some social trend. And we're standing by idly while the medical community is making money off of it and acknowledging it. So we're afraid to say anything, but we're going to have the courage to stand up. And I believe we will. I think what you're doing, what we've been hearing reported in the last few days, even pastors are struggling to find their voice on this. Mm-hmm. But this really isn't confusing. And we have a hopeful message. You don't have to live under confusion. That's a miserable way to be frightened and confused and alienated and isolated. You see, God delivered us from rejection. That's the message of the gospel, that the creator of heaven and earth has accepted you. It doesn't mean that everything is okay. It means there's a power to transform you from the clutches of things that would destroy you. And we have to have the courage to help identify right and wrong so people can know freedom. That's the good news that the church holds.
Well, I have a feeling that in another generation, maybe another decade or so, that the court systems are going to be clogged with cases of people who realize the error of their way here. And I hope, to your point, that the churches are going to be clogged with people who realize the error of their ways as well. Pastor Alan Jackson, always appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.